Okay, so we don't have too much time, so I think we can dive right into things. And I'll start by saying, over the past 18 months, we've heard governments mobilizing on artificial intelligence. Like, it feels like there's been a bit of a response that maybe we didn't see initially with technologies like social media. We know the public feels quite engaged when it comes to AI ethics and making sure this technology doesn't do harm, or they're at least aware. So how are we doing? Are we doing okay? Are we moving in the right direction? Or what is missing from the conversation through the lens of responsible AI?
Since I'm now representing the government, maybe you should start with that one, Rumman.
Sure. Well, so about a year and a half ago, I wrote an op-ed for Wired, right? And that op-ed was AI desperately needs global oversight. And at that time, there really were not many organizations globally collaborating to look at the responsible use of artificial intelligence in a cross-border way. And I saw that as problematic, and many other people did as well, right? We had multiple people testifying to the Senate saying the same things, mainly because this is a borderless technology and companies also act in a borderless fashion. So I think actually it's been very interesting to see how quickly global governance has instituted and taken place. So we have safety institutes in 5 countries, I believe.
A few more than that.
Oh, yeah, more or like spinning up, right? We have the OECD, we have the UN expert advisory group. We just have so many organizations going on right now. There is plenty of work to be done. Next week, I have an op-ed coming out in Foreign Affairs about how we need to build in global governance that includes the needs of the global majority and how their needs can be different. But governance is a constant process of creating. You are never done. So it's not to say that, X, Y, Z are lacking. It's more that we will always be learning. But I will definitely say that I actually am very heartened to see how quickly a wide range of organizations have moved.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that, in part because the quickness in the past 18 months is partly what inspired me to sign up for a stint in the government for the first time in my life. I've been a very happy professor at Stanford doing work in the field of ethics and technology governance. And the 2023 executive order, as well as the variety of other things that Rumman just mentioned, helped to position the United States for a variety of different actions on AI as a general matter, but I'd say big tech and technology more generally. And I just want to pick up a kind of phrase that Rumman uses, come up on a couple of occasions. You used it too, which is choosing to describe this work as a form of governance or working on governance. And that is, in fact, the preferred phrase that I use, rather than I do work on AI ethics or I do work on AI policy. Because part of what inspires me, and it's what I think binds a bunch of this room together, is the idea that governance allows us to think of both the law and regulation and policy making that comes from formal institutions of government, which are a necessary condition for governance, but also professional norms, standards, tooling that comes from the respective profession. And that's going to be a function not only of government, but of the people who work in the tech industry, who work in academia, who work within civil society organizations that are trying to create best practices and standards that cut across companies rather than just mere gold star practices for individual companies. And the intertwining of these things is what I think puts the US AI Safety Institute into the conversation, since the role of the Safety Institute as a body that is housed within NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, is to help issue tests and evaluations for frontier AI models, as well as guidance in the form of best practices. And I would add global coordination and cooperation with all of the different stakeholders present here in the room. So governance is, for me, the key word. And if I can say just one last thing, and here I'm partly inhabiting my old self as an academic, but my new self now as a member of the government, AI ML developers, or the entire academic training of people who go into AI ML, it's a very young profession. People have not been around for decades and decades, having been steeped in what counts as the responsible practice of AI ML. And so part of what I think is essential for all of us is to imagine not just the formal role of government and law and policy and regulation, but in accelerating the developmental maturity of what is essentially a very immature field of AI and ML when you compare it to the law, when you compare it to biomedical research. And so we're in the early days of an acceleration of the basic maturity of what the field understands to be the responsible practice of developing artificial intelligence or practicing machine learning.
And I guess there's an added complexity there because sometimes AI researchers come through academic institutions, so maybe we can formalize that process, but sometimes that's not the case, and anyone can kind of pick up and code. My next question, and you do or do not have to answer on behalf of governments, but when we look at governments throughout the world mobilizing on responsible AI, what aspect of responsible AI are they prioritizing? Is it how AI intersects with society? Is it national security complications or implications of the technology? Is it both? Do those have to be different? Where do you think the priorities lie? And is that sufficient?
I can start this one, actually. I will also start by saying, when Rob and I were sitting in the audience, we were both like, oh, you know what? We're both political science PhDs up here. So I'm going to give you a very political science answer, and then Rob can join me in a very political science answer. Every level of government has a different responsibility. And I think that, so this another imaginary op-ed I've written in my head but not yet published is actually about the role of different levels of government in governance. Right. So, and again, we're just going to nod at each other because we've studied this extensively and you've probably taught it extensively. So like the job of the federal government is different from the job of the city of New York, which is different from the job of the state of Illinois, and also we are navigating what the job is of a global institution or an institute. Right. So again, maybe a slightly convoluted answer to your question is, I think that is like what should be or is prioritized is sort of being sorted out right now, not just from the perspective of what is important, but also who is doing what. Because right now we do see a bit of redundancy. We do see a bit of sort of, are you doing this? Am I doing this? Are we doing this? Let's figure this out. And I think it's actually, as a political scientist, a very fascinating time to see essentially this new layer of governance forming and then how that interplays with the geopolitics of all the other sub-layers that exist.
Yeah, and so speaking now from within the United States AI Safety Institute and the role I play there, the overarching mission of the AI Safety Institute is to advance the science of AI safety. And you can hear in that the echoes of a distinction being made between law and regulation. The Safety Institute is located in the executive branch of government in the Department of Commerce within one of the many divisions within Commerce, NIST. It's, of course, Congress's role to pass new regulatory authorities, not the role of the Safety Institute to do so. And so what we do is we issue and develop tests and evaluations of frontier models. You might have seen that the US government announced that it had signed an MOU with both OpenAI and Anthropic to administer tests and evaluations to their as yet unreleased next generation models. We issue guidance. The Safety Institute issued draft guidance with public comment period having just ended on managing misuse risk of dual use foundation models. And then we also engage in coordination across the multi-stakeholders within the domestic arena as well as the global arena. The Secretary Gina Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce, announced at the end of the Seoul Summit, AI Summit a few months ago, that the US would host a convening this fall in order to try to establish an international network of AI safety institutes. And that's been one of the main things that I've been devoting my attention to. So again, these different layers and responsibilities of different parts of government. And I think the US now is being far more proactive in its expectations and actions than it was in the past, a more conventional reactive way that you were describing in the opening remarks in the social media era, in which there was a genuine sort of distance and pause.
I guess there's kind of an inherent tension because on the one hand, it is reassuring to know that institutions do move slow, but sometimes that's a good thing, right? We don't want them acting always like a startup, that maybe we actually are doing okay when it comes to the general state of responsible AI. Governments are mobilizing, people are aware. I guess there's an inherent tension with the public because we also feel AI interacts and engages with us every day. Are these systems secure and safe and as responsible as they could be? Even though we are doing everything we can in the background, is what we have now safe?
I start? I'd say you've just described one of the main motivations for the creation of the US AI Safety Institute is to develop more than an opinion about whether either ordinary or frontier AI models are safe for society or safe for individuals, but rather to establish an empirical basis for being able to answer that question with some confidence. That's partly what I have in mind. That's partly what I think the whole Institute has in mind in saying it's dedicated to advancing the science of AI safety. I mean, when I think about this prior to having entered government by hanging out on the engineering quad at Stanford University, it was always kind of surprising to learn that even the most advanced AI ML professors would say, of course, that we're not quite sure we can explain how it is that these models actually, output the things that they do. We're excited about the extraordinary capabilities that are possible, but we don't have a scientific understanding for explaining their actual behavior. That's a form of scientific immaturity, I want to say. And part of the Safety Institute's role now from with government is to stimulate and advance the basic scientific understanding, the explainability of models, as well as a whole variety of things about whether any particular AI agent or AI model, AI chatbot, in its kind of scaled application will turn out to be safe or not.
So building on Rob's point, the short answer is no, because the longer answer is what Rob just said. We don't know what safe even means. We do know that general purpose AI models, what a lot of these frontier models are, can be used for an infinite number of things. In doing so, you open up an infinite number of threat vectors. So one of the projects we're working on at Humane Intelligence, which is launching on Monday, if folks in this room hopefully have signed up for it, we're working with NIST on a pilot program for something called ARIA, and it's assessing risk and impact of AI systems. With it, literally anybody in America who is over the age of 18, any legal resident over the age of 18 in the United States is asked to sign up to test and evaluate large language models. So I think, we don't even know how to test models. We are still creating, I run this little working group on metrology, which is essentially the science of evaluations, where we look at what does it mean to conduct a scientifically valid or rigorous evaluation. What does it even mean? Like, we all talk about red teaming, I talk about red teaming, right? But everybody has a different definition. What does it mean to have a robust red teaming exercise, right? My background is in experimental design. I was a quantitative social scientist, so much of my education was learning how to build valid and robust test mechanisms, and also how to even test the things we have for validity. We have none of these right now. So I think, as Rob said, there's a good amount of time that needs to be spent on maybe stuff that seems boring, right? It's a little less sexy, it's a little less exciting. No models will go whir at the end of it. Maybe they will go whir a little bit less, but that is kind of the point.
And just to add to that, I mean, again, thinking about, for any of you who are recently in a university setting, you'll know, just as Rumman said, if you are studying computer science as an undergrad or a grad student, the sexy thing to do is to do NLP or computer vision and to push the capability frontier forward. That gets you status. That's what the professional conferences are going to select for and assign you a greater reputation on the basis of being having a paper there. And we're at a moment where we need the broader scientific basis of what a mature science is, so that we have not just the capability frontier being pushed forward, but a greater social understanding about what would make these enormous capabilities safer, more reliable, robust for users in all kinds of ways. I mean, it's as if, to make the comparison again to other professions, Jennifer Doudna, one of the co-discoverers of CRISPR, the extremely powerful gene editing technique, it's as if, people who are in bioengineering thought the only cool thing to do was to go tinker around in the lab with creating novel genomes through this powerful technique without a more robust understanding about the broader social implications. AI ML now is at a stage where the capability frontier is so significant that the talent pool more generally has to be oriented towards the basic scientific explanation or foundation of the entire field. And I think that's the powerful moment that all of us in the room face and need to contribute to.
And I do want to dive into, you had mentioned red teaming, and in case, we'll just give one of the probably 565 million definitions, probing AI models for potential harms and potential vulnerabilities. And this has been kind of seen as the go-to I don't even want to use the word standard of care, but way to test, is this model safe, by AI companies themselves. But Dr. Chowdhury, you have an interesting view that this should be something that's open to the public, and this is what your initiative is championing. Can you explain why red teaming should be something that maybe we actually open up, and maybe it isn't sufficient that just a company gets to say, my model's safe, but the public weighs in, and how we could scale something like that?
Well, and I'm actually going to build on Bob's point from the very beginning, where it actually is about one's lived experience, one's unique perception. I think one of the most interesting things we're going to learn is how people of very different walks of life, very different skill and ability and familiarity with AI models interact with them. What do they think of when they think of breaking a model? Like I gave this NIST sign up to literally my gym manager. I cannot wait to see what he does with it. Truly. Because like we live in our little bubble, and our bubble's actually quite small, but the number of people we impact with our bubble is quite huge. And those people feel very disempowered. One thing I've learned from running these public red teaming events, I think people know Humane Intelligence for our work at DEF CON last year, running the Generative AI Red Teaming Challenge that had 2,200 people. We've done them with scientists, architects, students. We are going to do them with policymakers, just a wide range of topics. And overwhelmingly, what is so interesting about these events is that they are always optimistic, which is very strange to me, right? Like, why is it that all these people are here to find issues with models, but people are enjoying themselves and optimistic about what AI means in their lives? And I think it's actually because we have this human desire to understand, to master things by figuring out how to break it, right? So once we figured out the upper limit of a thing, we're like, oh, this isn't smarter than me. I'm actually able to discern. So I think one of the most important things, and one of the values of bringing in public feedback into how models are built is, number one, no company could possibly encompass all of the viewpoints, right, of everybody in the country, let alone in the world. Like folks probably know that I used to run the machine learning ethics team at Twitter. And I thought about this a lot, right? Twitter is such a big space. And even if we're trying to be very inclusive in how we hire, I only have so many people I can hire. You know, it is the 1% of the world that get to even step foot in Silicon Valley, let alone be hired in tech. So who are we really representing? So by generative AI, actually, I saw it as an opportunity to let more people interact with models, right? So folks in the room who have been in the responsible AI space for some time, the hardest part was always explaining to people why this mattered, right? Because they never saw themselves interacting with an AI model until fall of 2022. Now it is easy to explain. And now it's easy to say, here, I'm literally going to stick this in front of you and give you examples why it matters to you, or you tell me why this matters to you. And it just opens up this massive amount of possibility. Let's take advantage of it.
Can I add just one thing to that? And I think at the end of the day, I'm agreeing fully here with Rumman about the benefits of this greater access to red teaming or various ways of interacting with models, and getting the individual perspectives of people so they filter into the broader process of designing and deploying these technological solutions or products. And as someone who's spent most of my life thinking and studying and writing and teaching about democratic theory, I always bristle a little bit when people, especially in Silicon Valley, describe how it's so fantastic to be able to democratize access to AI, democratizing technology. Because democracy at the end of the day is not just something about access to as many people as possible. It is a system of governance. Where is the rule part of the democratizing AI? So yes to all of that as an input into governance and true democratization.
Absolutely. And we only have a couple of minutes left. So my final question, and I'll preface it by saying, sometimes I think some governments, people feel that maybe we weren't prepared for the rapid advent of generative AI. We're kind of reacting. We're doing okay, as we've learned, so we can exhale a little bit. But one thing we do know is coming are AI agents, right? Autonomous systems that can actually act autonomously on our behalves in the world, whether they're 1 year away, 3 years, 5 months, 5 years. We know they're in the pipeline. What safeguards and systems can we proactively deploy or think about before something like an AI agent can come into the world and can act autonomously on our behalves? What could be in place now? What can we do today?
Sure, I'll start. So this is a great example of something where as a version of repeating or reinforcing what I've said before, is here is the frontier capability. Autonomous AI agents that will, in the near future, likely come to be a relatively familiar part of our lives. And that's an extraordinary technical accomplishment with these powerful AI ML systems. And also, we want to have a scientific explanation or foundation for understanding not merely how the models behave as autonomous agents, but how humans interact with those machine agents, and then how, if they're adopted at scale, there's a systemic or social effect to the introduction of AI agents more broadly into our lives. And that fundamentally is what it means to have a mature science, a mature practice of doing AI ML. So I want to think that the Safety Institute will play its, relatively speaking, that it will occupy the lane of trying to advance the science of AI safety. But it's not for the Safety Institute alone to do this. This is a responsibility, in certain respects, for all of us to deepen the scientific understanding about AI ML systems as we push the capability frontier forward, and not just chirp about the extraordinary advances in the capability, but actually to get a clear empirical understanding that spans technical fields, social scientific fields, and humanistic fields to get a purchase on what it will mean for their widespread adoption.
Yeah, I will add about AI agents that AI agents, I think, will push the limit of whether or not generative AI is a party trick or whether it's actually something we're going to use, right? So when AI agents...
thickens.
Sorry?
The plot thickens.
The plot is going to thicken in the last 30 seconds that we have. So companies will try to sell you agentic AI tools. They'll say, here is a bot that can, whatever, take care of your family's healthcare, whatever, right? It is not your obligation to buy it or pay for it. Isn't that right? You don't actually have to use it. So I think what's going to be interesting with agentic AI is it will only work if we subscribe to it, if we want to use it for a particular reason. Right? So earlier this year, I gave a TED Talk and I called for a right to repair. Because right now we have this one-way street where stuff is dumped on us and we have to kind of handle the negative externalities ourselves with no way of giving feedback. So a large part of this crawl, walk, run, from doing structured red teaming to opening up the different audiences, is so that a wide range of people are familiar with and want this idea of I should have a reciprocal relationship with the technology that I have decided to bring into my life. And also I have the option to not bring it into my life. So I do think the agentic AI, so I also want to explain what agentic AI is. I think there is this fantasy world where it's kind of like Vision from the Avengers. So it's not. It's just strings of APIs that will talk to each other, right? So instead of I ask ChatGPT to make a 2-day itinerary for a weekend in Austin, and then I got to go to the booking websites and do it, some travel agent literally will go and do that booking for me. So it's not this, I'm slightly oversimplifying it, but actually not too much. So all that is to say is this will be another product. It is a product that will do work for you. It may be useful, it may not be useful. That discernment, that critical thinking that everybody in this room already has, use it, but also it is our responsibility as people who have the ability to build systems of interaction to create a way for you to give feedback. This is the entire purpose of creating this feedback loop with companies, right? Opening up red teaming to wider audiences as we create more and more advanced AI solutions like agentic AI and whatever will come after that. All of it will ask you to give up more autonomy. You do not have to do it, and you should only do it if you have something like a right to repair.
I think that's a great way to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.